recording. We are live on tape from New York and California.
Yes, we are.
Hi, Nicky.
Hi, Andy.
So I'm really, we're both a bit nervous, I think, because this is the first. I mean, we've recorded a lot of ourselves on many things, but we've never done it with video before. So this is kind of like, yeah, how's it going to
Yeah, it's weird.
come out? It's weird. I mean, here's the weirder thing, Nicky, and you probably, I don't know if you realize this, but I haven't actually seen you since GaryCon 2019 because we never used video on our games either.
That's right. That's right. It was our first time seeing each other, so you look great, Andy.
Oh, you look great too. And let's,
Thank
I
you.
think we're both on like this, I don't know, like physical reinvention, spiritual reinvention journey, aren't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been a journey through COVID and all that, but
Yeah.
let's just say we both look great. We're both
Okay,
doing
let's
great.
leave it at that. We're doing great. Otherwise, people will think we're just horrendous narcissists. Um,
Exactly.
but the reason, the reason I wanted to have this interview with you is that, as you know, because you're part of it, we're creating horror podcasts, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Um,
Yes, we are.
but
They're good
mm,
ones too.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I think they're good actual plays. I'm not sure they're good horror podcasts, and I'll explain why. And I've said this on my previous episode. Well, actually, on the podcast episode. So, for anyone who's watching this video that doesn't know about the podcast, which I can't believe is anyone, but it might be. You never know. Um, I do two podcasts actually. One's called Expedition to the Grizzly Peaks. The other one is called Grizzly Peaks Radio. And Nicky is one of my longtime players and collaborators on Grizzly Peaks Radio actual plays, where we make horror podcasts. But here's my problem. I don't think they're scary. And if they're not scary, are they really horror? Uh, I suppose it's a question that answers itself, isn't it? Um, so, Nicky, do maybe you can tell me whether you think they're scary in any way, or there are elements even. Let's be kind to ourselves. What do you think?
Okay. I think there are scary elements for sure, especially in the King in Yellow actual play that we did that started at GaryCon, gosh, 2019, right?
Hmm.
And then continued GaryCon 2020 and now into 2021, I guess. Although we ended that one, but
Hmm.
um, it is scary in parts. It's creepy in parts. There's a part, without giving too much away, if people want to listen, where we're in a crypt and we are approached by I don't think we ever figured out what it was because we never turned around.
No, don't turn around.
Yeah, but that part was actually, I think, really creepy. The way you played it, the way we all kind of
Hmm.
felt it. I could actually feel that one. You know, how sometimes you can feel horror in your body. You can feel just the goosebumps, and I
Yeah,
felt that one.
that's
And I think
interesting.
you're just, yeah, that scene especially stood out for me as being particularly creepy.
Mm.
And then I think you have your descriptions can be really creepy. Of course, it's called Cthulhu, so they can be quite graphic and some people would say gross. I don't know. I kind of like that part of horror. I'm a gore girl in a way, I guess. But
Fantastic. I love to hear
yeah,
that, Nicky. I love it.
and I so I think those can be creepy to the right um listener or to the right player.
Mm.
Because if you don't like that kind of stuff, or it scares you, obviously, if you're playing Call of Cthulhu, usually you're a horror fan, at least a little bit. But if that
I,
kind of bothers you, if you have the squick factor, and I know on your podcast you talked about the three Stephen King types
mm.
of horror, so I think you're pretty good at doing those descriptions for sure.
Thank you, Nicky. I enjoy doing them, and I like the reactions they create in the players. I actually think that's the one thing you can present to the players that gets a reaction, gets a horror-like reaction, because as soon as you describe something disgusting, your mind your mind immediately fills in all the blanks, doesn't it? And
Mhm.
um, interestingly enough, after making that episode, I started listening. There's an audio book of Stephen King's actual essay. It's a book called Dance Macabre, where
Mhm.
those three levels of horror he came up with that idea. And the bit that I just listened to, and I'll see what reaction this gets to you. He was talking about how your mind can you know with an image you're given, it can actually really affect you. He was saying when he was a kid, this friend of his said, just told him about this thing, and there's a big banister in the house, and he said to Stephen, he said, imagine you're sliding down that banister, like kids do. Now imagine the banister is just turning into a razor blade.
Ooh.
And he said,
That
uh,
oh,
yeah, see,
that's
see,
horrible.
it's horrible. It's horrible. And he said that stuck in his head for a week. He couldn't get it out of his head for a week,
Yeah,
that thought, because we can connect really well with these horrible, visceral. We can imagine horrible things happening to our bodies and to us,
mhm,
because yeah, I mean, we've all had pain, we've all had accidents before, we've all seen things, and you can just extrapolate. But so I think creating that sensation of yuck, of ugh, it is quite easy actually. I mean, I just did it to you then. It's not my
yes, you
story,
did.
but
Yeah.
but 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 the other types of horror, I think, are. And again, I said this on the podcast. I think they're really hard, really, really hard to create. Not just clearly not like for you guys while we're playing, because to actually make you scared, like psychologically scared, I think that's really hard to do, because we're playing a game, so you know what
Exactly.
the stakes are. But more importantly, creating that sensation in the listener, I think, is much harder. Um, but I think that comes from actually the fact that we're playing a game and not telling a scripted story, because the whole idea of building tension and creating tension, it's really hard to do when you're, one, improvising, which we're doing constantly, and two,
Right.
when you have all of these kind of interruptions, like either game interruptions or you know silly comments, or all that stuff that we do.
And I think you're really hit the nail on the head there because it tends to go silly, is what I've noticed with most games I played. It tends to go silly. Even if you say, I'm going to play this character serious, it just tends to go silly. And in horror, especially, that does not make for, scary. It's just, it's silly. It's Peter Jackson's Dead Alive. It's not,
Mm.
uh, what's
Or it's
scary for me,
or it's the Black
Poltergeist.
Knight, or it's the Black Knight from Monty Python,
Exactly.
even worse,
Yes, yes,
which actually
especially
is
with the
quite,
current group we're playing with.
yeah, which is actually a disgusting scene. It's, when you watch that for the first time as a young person, you're like, ugh, but it's also so silly that you can't be scared by it.
Exactly, exactly. And I
Um,
think to get a really good horror game, I don't think it has to be scripted, but I think the players all have to buy in really deeply. They
hmm.
have to say, I'm going to try really hard to avoid the silly comments. I mean, I suppose you could be sarcastic a little bit if you're playing that kind of character, but even that, I would avoid it as much as I could and just really play it as straight as I could.
And
And
this
I think
brings us neat.
everybody has to do that.
And yes, one great, and this brings us neatly to the kind of key point, which is when we talked about the King in Yellow. I think that's the closest we've got as a group to maintaining that seriousness and to approaching, let's say, that those other types of horror that aren't just about gross out, that aren't just about horrible imagery. And the reason I think we got there is that all three of you, Archie, and Kenneth, all took your characters seriously, even if they had comic elements to them. They all had this darkness at the heart of them.
And maybe that's partly because they were pre-gen and the backstories were a little dark. Like, my sister was missing, and that was a big deal, and that ended up becoming kind of dark at the end. I mean, what
Mm,
happened was pretty dark. And Mark, the soldier, had horrific, war images in his backstory, at least that's
yeah.
how it was played. So I think that really helped, and of course, William Yorick was a gravedigger, so,
Mm,
around death a lot, and even though that character could go funny, the way Archie played him, he was funny but not funny because he was going insane, he was going mad, quite visibly going mad.
mm.
And so even though at times, you might have giggled at something he said, the character wasn't really funny. He was trying to think he was the king in yellow.
He
So
he was disturbing, I thought, more than funny.
yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
he played it really well. It was like this was a
Yep.
guy who was sort of on the edge of insanity a lot of the time,
Yep.
even without having to make the rolls. He was there.
Exactly. And I think that that kind of just on the edge there of the way he was playing it, I think that really worked. And maybe that was partly because of the backstories that were in place. I don't know. And then
I think
just really committing to that.
I think that's a really good point. And um, you mentioned earlier about something that you found that found you in a way in the crypt, and you didn't want to turn around and look at it. But right before that, I think Archie's character William enacted probably the most horrible thing you've done, which is, and it's kind of almost off camera because it's in the dark. He kills a potentially just completely innocent man because
Yep.
he's paranoid. I mean, and then you guys are kind of dealing with that.
Yes, exactly. And the point is that we didn't, what's the term? Murder hobo it. We didn't just laugh about it. You
Yeah,
have to commit to that's horrific. You don't just go around killing people normally, right?
yeah.
Especially as those characters we were playing. So, yeah, we had to react to it as if, "Oh my gosh, you just killed we don't know who
Mm,
because you're going insane." And that was really yeah, that was really disturbing. And
mm.
that whole scene in the crypt was something else. I love that scene.
Yeah, me too. I think it's one of our best moments, all in all. Just the weird setup and situation, and then all these different characters interacting with each other in these really strange and unexpected ways. I was shocked when William killed that character. I wasn't
Yep.
ready for it, but I had to. Then everything that came out of that was just, it was inevitable in a way. Um, and then let's go back to what you said about having the pre-gens, because in, you know, conventional wisdom might say that if you've got a pre-gen, it's harder to commit to it because you didn't come up with it. But those pre-gens, as you may remember, they're something actually that they've been honed. Those pre-gens, I didn't come up with them. They're from the Arkham Horror game like universe. So
Okay.
they're almost like, almost every character in that game universe is a almost a perfect archetype of something. They're so well painted, even with just a few brushstrokes. Like they're really distinct. Each of them has this, as we said, this darkness at the heart of them, because that's their reasoning for why they would be involved in the mythos, is that they're somehow drawn to it or compelled um,
Yep.
or driven to engage with it. So they all have something unpleasant driving them. You've got your missing sister. Mark has his dead girlfriend. William has
Mhm.
his broken dreams and his intimate experiences with the undead. you
Yeah, death.
know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But what I think can create this personal horror, which I think starts to create this sensation of terror in the listener, is when you react properly, like you said, you react properly to the horror, which is something that we usually don't see in games. People generally just have a laugh and
I
carry on.
agree. I agree completely, and I think if we are going to try and do a true horror game, as was mentioned with our other friends, there needs to be either a session 0 where we create characters together that fit really, really well with whatever setting, and then have that darkness. And
Mm.
we can all brainstorm what those things could be, or something like that, so that we can really make sure that we can all commit to it. And we don't have to know. It doesn't. You can do it. We don't have to all do it together if you want to keep things secret. But
I'll come back to that in a minute because I
okay,
have thoughts. I have thoughts. I've had thoughts, but yeah, the because it's the reaction. It's the reaction that puts the listener into your shoes. It's
yes,
partially my description, but the bit of the horror film that really gets to us is seeing the terror in the protagonist. In Jamie Lee Curtis
yes,
in the cupboard. That's scarier in a way than
yes.
seeing Michael Myers. Is seeing her in the cupboard waiting for her doom.
Exactly, or the scene in Alien where Ripley goes to put on the spacesuit when she discovers that it's followed her. That is one of the most terrifying scenes to me. I mean, I love Alien. That's one of my favorite horror movies. It's
Me
horror in
too.
space. It's great. Yeah, the first one, yeah. And yeah, it really makes a difference. The way Ripley is so terrified that you feel it. You like feel it in your in your chest. Your heart starts racing, and we need to be able to somehow do that as well. And that goes for any emotions, not just horror. In King in Yellow, when I angrily responded to my my roommate, I mean, I really felt angry in that moment, and I knew Jenny felt angry in that moment.
Yeah.
So, and I think that helps other people really say, "Wow, she's." I just think that really helps if you really commit to the emotion.
And I was really provoking you, like as a GM and a character. I wanted that reaction. I was like, this girl, this friend of yours, who probably was like somehow, this bully or something, and she's
Yep,
behaving like she did at finishing school and treating you
yep.
like a second class citizen.
Yeah, Jenny had seen too much to take that, and I really think that that just kind of when you can feel your character's anger or when you can feel your character's fright, even if you're not scared, you know how they're feeling. I think and you can portray that, that really helps.
Mm.
Not calling myself a great actress or anything, but I really was angry in that moment. I was mad. So Jenny got mad too.
Well, to be honest, I think you guys are really good actors, at least in this in the context of what we're doing, because I've now played with a lot of different players, and um, I don't I probably shouldn't say this, but I always think of you three as sort of as the archetype of what I want from my players. Like full commitment, you stay in character, you don't keep cracking silly jokes that deflates the tension, um,
Yep.
and and um, and yeah, you're convincing. You convince me when we're playing. You convince, I think, the audience who's listening.
Oh, well, that's nice of you to say, and it's nice to have you as a keeper that plays off of us so well. I think we have a good chemistry. So, especially in that
Definitely.
King in Yellow game, the chemistry was out of this world.
It was. It
So,
was. I wonder whether also I had sort of had this thought that maybe a smaller group is better for that intensity, that horror drama.
oh, yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but it probably is less moving parts, less chance someone's going to, forget what they're, forget the part they're supposed to be playing and say something silly. Because I tend towards silly in in real life, but really, so, but yeah, if you have less people, you have more of a chance to really bring it as a cohesive horror experience, I think,
Mm. I mean, you get
if that
more
makes sense.
spotlight time, more character development, or those are just pragmatic things. But I think also it becomes more intense because you're in the spotlight more. You don't have. I also spoke about this in another interview. That horror, when having six people, heavily armed investigators, all plowing through everything. That's not really a horror setup. That's aliens, not Alien.
Yes. Yes, yes, that's James Cameron, not Ridley Scott, right? Yeah, I agree. And I agree, a horror game would have to be less weapons. I mean, it couldn't be pulp. It just couldn't be pulp at all. You'd have to play regular Call of Cthulhu or something similar.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
you just have to create that sense of helplessness. I think helplessness is an
Mm.
important feeling for horror. That sense that my character is helpless in this moment. What is she going or he going to do, or they?
So
So yeah,
so it's interesting you say pulp, because obviously we played, I think, 10 sessions of King in Yellow, I think it was. Then we took a little break, and then we started playing Two-Headed Serpent, which is pure pulp. It's high octane. You have very powerful characters, but relatively speaking, you're hard to kill.
yep,
um, I'm loving playing that game. Unfortunately, we're on hiatus at the moment due to scheduling, but I hope we get back to it. But it's a really different experience, isn't it?
agreed. It is definitely more, especially that adventure. It feels more Indiana Jones than it does, Alien or Poltergeist or something like that. It definitely feels more adventure, which is fine. I'm loving it, and my character there is a little more jokey. Still takes things seriously, but he's a little more. Well, he's not as smart as Jenny was, but
and I think,
Jenny
and I
was
think,
smart.
and I think we have played it a bit more for laughs. I mean, some of the horror in it is over the top, and
Yeah.
it's like it's more leans more into the sort of sci-fi, weird fiction horror
Yes.
side of things as well. And yeah, you said Indiana Jones. It's busting into ancient tombs and fighting giant
Yes.
snakes, and it's a completely different atmosphere,
Yeah.
really.
Super fun, but I don't think that wouldn't be the right atmosphere for what you're trying to accomplish in this next little experiment. So that's
No.
why, in my opinion, I don't think we could do it in pulp because pulp just has. I don't know. You have to have that feeling of dread and danger, and not that there aren't stakes in pulp, because obviously there are. Richard, my character, oh well, it's a spoiler, but he's had to use his luck, so quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can
yep,
still go insane. You can still go insane in pulp.
and you can still go insane in pulp,
Takes longer, but it can happen. I mean,
and that's
I haven't told you much about our mask campaign, but we switched to pulp. We're up to session 113. We've played
wow,
113 sessions. It's a huge
oh, it's
campaign,
crazy.
yeah, and we've lost two characters to insanity, and we're playing pulp, and that's still a viable risk.
And that's another thing I think the madness, because it's easy again to go silly when you go mad.
Hmm.
But there are ways to play madness to where it is scary. And I
Mm.
think that's for the listener, especially if that's your goal. If you can get your players when they go mad to make it not silly, but to really make it scary. This person is going insane. I don't know if you've ever seen Jacob's Ladder,
Oh God,
where
yeah.
his man is slowly trying to lose his mind. That's the kind of madness, although you don't know exactly what's happening in that movie, but um
That,
that's the kind of scary madness
that's a
that I
really
think
good
we
point. And I think one of the pitfalls, the downfalls of the madness, mechanic, not really the mechanic, more like the whole concept of it, is that players often just kind of, it just drifts away. It just goes away after like half a session, and then they forget they but you've really got to keep going at it the way that Archie did with William. It was like it
yes.
was always
Yep.
there pretty much from the beginning, from our Gary Con session, where he had about
Yeah, yeah,
madness
he was
then.
yeah. And there was a time in King in Yellow where I went mad and started laughing, but I tried to do it in a weird way so that it wasn't funny laughter. It was, "Oh, she's lost her mind," and now because of the
Yes.
tentacle thing, because I had a tentacle problem because of the
Y-
emissary.
yeah,
Yeah.
you had a
So
small tentacle problem.
small tentacle in Cthulhu, they're all tentacle problems eventually. I
Yeah,
mean,
they.
so yeah. No, I'm kidding. But
I mean,
no, I
go on.
no, I was just gonna say, I just think that you really need to play madness. If you're gonna do horror, the players have to understand you've got to play madness in a serious way. I don't know how else to say it.
Mm.
Not
So,
funny mad, but serious mad.
so I do hope we get back to Two-Headed Serpent. I
Yes.
we haven't actually even begun to edit and put together that series. I think it'll make a really good. We had some awesome sessions. Really, I'm
Yes,
thinking
we did.
back. Again, the characterization is great. I think we're building in backstory in a way that we haven't done before in any of my campaigns. This is the first. Okay, I've done it a bit in masks because we've just been playing for so long, but I think the way that you're folding in your characters' motivations and backstories, the structure of it enables that because you keep going back to New York in between missions,
Yep.
so you have the opportunity to do that. But yeah, I think it's got a lot going for it.
Oh, I love that campaign. Like I said, it's not the horror that you want to try to do, but it's definitely has its really fun moments. We've had some great pulp moments in that. All of our characters have.
Mm, yeah.
Mr. Selby and Richard and and of course AP.
Yes. Oh
So
gosh.
who is just amazing.
Oh yeah.
And
That's
Archie
that.
does a really nice job with him. So
Amazing. I think actually that's probably the most entertaining character that anyone's ever come up with in any of my games. I mean, he is on this
I
other
agree.
level with AP Thackeray.
Yes, but again, AP Thackeray wouldn't fit in a straight up horror at all.
No,
So
no, because he's ludicrous in many ways, but also
yes,
like I mean an Indian academic, India as in the country India, Indian academic professor with a Tommy gun.
yes.
I
And I
mean,
will say to any listeners out there, just wait till we get to the cowboy hat. I won't spoil it, but just wait
oh
for the
man, the
cowboy hat.
cowboy hat.
That's all I have to say. Listen to the
So
cowboy hat.
talking about keeping it serious, you have
Yes,
recently joined possibly the biggest bunch of jokers that I play with, and I say that
they
with
are.
great love.
They're awesome.
We used to I used to affectionately call us the old farts session. But now that you and TJ have joined, I've had to change that because you're neither old nor farts, and so we're now calling it the White Dwarf sessions because those are all adventures from the pages of the seminal gaming magazine from the UK in the White Dwarf. Um, and I I said I said to you before you join, because you came in sort of a few sessions into our most recent campaign, which we're not gonna talk about at all because we haven't released it at all. I haven't even said what it is yet
Oh,
to the
okay.
audience. But we can talk about it in general terms.
Okay.
So I said to you, listen to these other episodes just so you get a feel for the atmosphere. Because
And
I
I
really
listened to
thought
them.
you better listen to them because this is different. This is probably different to what you've experienced before with my game. And how would you describe the experience of listening to it?
Well, it's super fun. So anybody who's watching this, go listen to those Watchers of Walberswick and the
Yeah,
Surrey Enigma, right? That's the name of it.
yeah, that's right.
Yep. Because I've listened to them all, including the most recent number 6, I think, in Surrey. Um, and they're fun. They're a lot of fun, but the characters are a bit bumbling. Like
Yeah.
I picture these group of old. Actually, they remind me, and maybe it's because they're all maybe it's because they're all British. I don't know, but they remind me a little bit of the wizards in the Terry Pratchett novels. I don't know if you've ever read those,
Yes.
but but they remind me a little bit of that. It's serious, and magic is serious, and they call up dark entities. But in the end, all they really want is their jam trolley, their trays. And it's like with the one character who just wants to go to the bar. And so
Absolutely.
that's what it
Absolutely.
reminds me of, if I'm being honest. And I mean that, of course, with all the love in my heart, because Terry Pratchett is one of my most favorite authors of all time.
I mean, they
So,
are a funny bunch. Unfortunately, Colin Spike Pit Green had to he left the group because he had to cut down on his gaming. He's just started a really
oh,
intense new job, and he was great as well. But the others, Scott, Barney, and Spencer. that they're just hilarious in such different ways, and
Fabulous role players, fabulous.
yeah, fabulous, but also the absolute opposite of what you want in a way if you're trying to create horror, because everything
Yes,
becomes
yes.
just ludicrous. Now, again, I say that with all the love in the world, but maybe perversely, I'm this is the group who we're with you that we're going to try and make this scary thing. Now, I think they can do it. I don't
Absolutely.
think it's their default mode, but I think they can do it because, as you said, they're great role players.
Yes, they are, and I think we've kind of talked about it with them, I know, but I think if you tell them this is what you want, then that is what they'll do. I think that's these characters just seem to go the direction of the, a little bit bumbling, a little bit silly, but still fun and interesting. And they're all very interesting and intelligent characters. I think if you tell them we need to scale that back and go straight, I think that they will absolutely be able to do it. I mean, they're fabulous, as I said.
So, so to pick up something that you said earlier, and we'll probably just wrap up on this because we're getting up to half an hour. You talked about session 0, making characters together. I think that's key. I think you need to be a coherent group, not just a random collection of characters that just happen to be together. I think that will make it seem more believable. Let's say, if that's even something that I think in a way it's important to make it believable, that you're believably in this situation, so the horror becomes
Oh,
real.
absolutely.
A-
Yes,
and
and it
and
gives
that
you stakes. If your
Yeah,
characters are all connected, it gives you a stake in each other, which I think is really
yes,
important for a horror situation. So if something horrifying is happening to somebody else, I feel that
yeah,
too.
yeah. You need to
Yeah,
care. You need to care
you need
when,
to care.
as opposed to laughing when one of the characters gets attacked by a Labrador.
The door, right? Yeah, right.
Episode 5 of the Sorry
Yes.
Enigma, guys.
Yep.
It's one of
Oh,
my
Hector
high points for sure.
was
But there was
great.
something else I thought about, and it just somehow came to me through a conversation with, I think, with TJ. We haven't talked about TJ. He'll be joining us. He's joined the group as well. He's something else entirely. He's a really interesting role player, I think. Um, but something occurred to me, what is that in the classic horror movies, characters often have hidden agendas. They have agendas and these really specific motivations, that are either obvious or they're hidden. Now,
Right.
um, let's let's give some examples. So in Alien, of course, um, I can't remember. It's Ian Holmes' character. I can't remember the name of the
Oh,
character.
Ash.
Ash.
Ash. Yep.
He's the ultimate character with the motivation, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, he has got 2 things going on. He's got that he knew about the creatures and, he knew spoilers for something from 1970 something, but, you know,
79.
he knew yeah, that's what I thought, but I didn't wanna say it. I'd be wrong. But, and then he's also a robot, right?
Yeah,
So,
and
he's got the 2 things going on.
yeah,
And that was horrifying when he goes after Ripley and she can't stop him and he's so strong, and
mm.
that was pretty I mean, well, not horrifying, but it was pretty scary, at least watching
So
it as a kid.
that's one example. But let me give you some other archetypal horror motivations that I've been thinking about.
Okay.
One is the scientist who has to find out, who will risk himself and everyone else to find out what's going on with the experiment. This is the Quatermass, Professor
Quatermass in the Pit.
Dr.
Yep.
Quatermass. You know, that's a classic horror trope. The other one is the kind of flawless hero who will sacrifice himself to save everyone else. The other is the coward who locks himself in the room and won't let anyone else in. These are all like very like psychological character driven behaviors, and I'm thinking it might be interesting to give everyone this sort of characteristic, Like you can come up with it, but you don't tell other people, and maybe you also give
Oh.
everyone an agenda as well. Um, and then that gives you a really strong like template for how do I react to any situation.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good idea because that is sometimes the hardest part, right? Is how really would this character react if you don't have um, a really strong trait, I guess it would be,
Mm.
to jump off of. And that is a really good idea. Now, is that something you'd want to have written down? Everybody chooses an archetype, or would you want someone to come up with their on their own and then just not tell anybody else? Because then of course, we would know someone's going to be the scientist, someone's going to be the
Now, here's how here's the dilemma in a way. I think if you don't tell each other, it's more interesting for the game as we're playing it. But if you do tell if everyone knows, then it's better for the role playing interactions because you kind of can almost engineer those situations yourselves. You know, you're talking to the absolute coward,
right.
or you know that the scientist you're talking to is going to do something really dangerous that's going to risk all of your lives. Um, so I don't know. It's like, and it comes back to, I guess, the final point is, you know, are we gonna, if we do this experiment, if we're really trying to create these atmospheres and these kind of believable situations and characters reacting in this interesting way, does it mean we're not going to have as much of a game?
Oh, that's interesting. That is a good question. At what time period would you want to set it? That might make it. I know that seems silly, but it might make a difference.
No,
I think
you
it's
good.
easier to yeah, yeah, to go
Good you've
straight if you're
answered that.
not always trying to do
Well,
1920s
no,
gangster
exactly.
tropes. Yeah.
You're bang on. I've said we're doing it in modern because it takes away
Oh,
all of that kind of trappings, all of those sort of cliches and tropes. You can much easier identify with the characters because they're closer to us in terms of their values and so on. So yeah, it's going to be a modern day scenario.
I think that's a very good idea. And I think if maybe we knew, I don't know, if maybe we knew and we could role play it better, it might make for a better horror experience. But like you said, you might lose the game, like the gamey aspect of it.
Mm,
But if we're trying to do horror, it might not be that might not be the worst thing that happens. I don't.
yeah. And then we can get into this whole debate about whether you should be trying to represent the game in your actual play or whether you're creating an audio drama. And we are not going to go into that discussion because that is a whole other podcast. So
Yeah, we
so Nikki, thank you so much for making the time this evening. I know you've had a long journey yesterday, and kudos to you for surviving. Nikki drove 10 hours yesterday, which I can't even conceive of what that does to you. Um,
well,
and
thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed our discussion.
yeah, great. And so to all the new viewers, if you don't know our podcast, go and check out Grizzly Peaks Radio and go to episode 1 and listen to The King in Yellow because that is where I think we've done some of our best work. And Nikki is one of the very first voices you'll hear on Grizzly Peaks Radio. So thank you so much, Nikki. And I think we're playing on Saturday, aren't we? Or is it next week? I don't know.
I think
I think
it's
it's the week
I
after,
think it's
isn't it?
next Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I don't. I don't know. I'm thinking before we go. I'm really thinking. Could we do a video actual play? And then my mind just sort of breaks when I think about how complicated that would be to do to in the way that we edit it. I know you can just record
Oh,
4 hours as Daniel does, or two
yep.
hours, but that's not what
Yeah, or stream it live on
we'll
YouTube.
stream it
Sometimes
live.
we stream it live. Yeah.
But for me, it's about editing it and making it this tight package, and thinking about how that would work with video just gives me the shivers. So anyway, take care, and I'll see you soon.
Yes. See you
Okay,
soon.
bye.
Bye.